In an era of a personally popular but decidedly left-wing president and with the Democrat supermajority in Congress, many Americans have become fed up and decided to fight back. Democrats are being voted out of office. Virginia, New Jersey, and Massachusetts have surprisingly all elected Republicans since President Obama entered the White House, and that trend is continuing, thanks in large part to the independent voters. And a good portion of those independent voters identify themselves as libertarians. The Libertarian Party issued a message earlier this week, and the headline was, quote, "A lot of Americans identify themselves as libertarians." So how do you know if you're a libertarian? What is a libertarian? And what positions and ideals do libertarians embrace? Let's ask Wes Benedict, the executive director of the Libertarian National Committee. Wes, welcome to Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me on the show. A lot of libertarians have been saying great things about you and your show, so it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you, and it's nice to have you. I mean, I have always thought that almost everyone in their heart wants what I consider to be the second greatest right. The first greatest right is the right to live, the right to life. The second is the right to be left alone. Don't most people, when confronted with, shall the government care for you or shall the government leave you alone, if they had their druthers, if they weren't in front of a camera, if they didn't have to answer to a political party, wouldn't almost everybody say, I'd rather be left alone?
Well, I wish the majority would say that. I'm not quite as optimistic that many people feel that way. And certainly I feel like it's my job and libertarians' jobs to convince others to be that way. But you've got Republicans out there scaring voters to death over terrorism, and you've got Democrats out there scaring voters to death over global warming and other things. So we've got politicians from both political parties out there scaring the public and telling them that what they need is more government out there to protect them. But I think people are starting to wake up to that.
I am sure that you have come to the conclusion, and I have, as though no secret of anybody who's heard me at Fox or read some of the things that I've published, is that I believe we really have, at the present time in America, and have had at least since the progressive era, one-party government. There's a Republican version that likes wars and prefers deficits. There's a Democratic version that likes taxes and prefers wealth transfers. But they both think that the government has whatever claim it wants on our property, whatever claim it wants on our income, and whatever claim it wants on our liberty, the natural law and the Constitution, they don't care about.
I think that's true. I think they've outlawed a lot of the Constitution with various things they passed out there. I mean, the Patriot Act, allowing them to spy on us, allowing them to arrest people and hold them without trials. I mean, yes, the Constitution has been trashed for dozens of years.
How do you get across the message that the two-party system, which we have basically had in this country, since the Civil War, has served us ill? I mean, do you talk about things like the Federal Reserve from in the last 100 years causing a loss of spending of 90% for the dollar? Do you talk about things like the Patriot Act? Do you talk about things like war is the health of the state? And whenever the government, whether it's run by a Republican or a Democrat, fights a war, decent, freedom-loving people are willing to trust the government and give away their freedoms. Question, what issues, what philosophical arguments resonate best with voters when you have to talk them out of the Republican and out of the Democratic Party at the same time?
Well, I think we try and the libertarians try and separate themselves from Republicans and Democrats or conservatives and liberals by pointing out that we are for smaller government and freedom on all issues. You do now. I know a lot of what Republicans and Democrats ultimately deliver is kind of the same sort of policies in government, but conservatives are out there talking about lowering taxes, even if they don't deliver that. Well, libertarians certainly support lower taxes and lower spending. And then you do have liberals or Democrats out there talking about civil liberties and not getting involved in personal lifestyle choices. And libertarians support those policies as well. So there is a difference between libertarians, conservatives, and liberals, and that's what a lot of voters, that's why a lot of them identify themselves as libertarians, or at least are not offended to be to be called that, is because they are both fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
I would think that libertarians wouldn't want us fighting wars unless the wars were just, meaning unless they were defensive wars, unless somebody had really attacked us or was about to attack us, that we shouldn't be trying to rearrange the landscape of the Middle East to suit our political preferences, and that we ought to be able to trade with almost any nation on earth, because if we were at peace, everybody would want to trade with us.
That's right. That's exactly what libertarians have always been saying. We need to get out of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I believe, 9/11 was certainly a terrible tragedy, but on 9/12, our former presidential nominee, Harry Browne, the former libertarian presidential nominee, wrote an essay saying, "Let's not go to war with Afghanistan." He did that the day after, which was considered insensitive, but it was kind of visionary of him to foresee that, look, that terrorism act is going to draw us into wars, and that's what's actually going to hurt America more than those terrorist acts.
Well, you mentioned the Patriot Act. I mean, it was only a handful of libertarian Republicans in the House of Representatives that voted against the Patriot Act. It is the most hateful piece of legislation passed by the Congress since the Alien and Sedition Acts. I mean, it allows the government to write its own search warrants, bypassing guarantees in the Constitution. A reason for the Revolutionary War was because the King of England allowed his soldiers to write their own search warrants, giving themselves permission to enter our homes. And now, 200 years later, we have a Congress that authorizes federal agents to do the same thing, and only a handful of constitutionalists and libertarians in the Republican Party in the House even vote against it.
Yeah, that was a terrible piece of legislation, and you know a lot more about the details than I do, but I just think it was particularly disgusting that they would have the gall to call it the Patriot Act. That act was anything but patriotic.
Wow. Where are things going politically? In other words, what is the likelihood that we may see in the House of Representatives a year from now someone who is neither a Republican nor a Democrat, but got there through the force of the Tea Party movements and the constitutionalist movements and the Campaign for Liberty movement, independent of either of the two major parties? Or am I jumping the gun? Am I going to have to wait for more than just a year from now to see if that happens?
Well, I still think it's a long shot for that to happen. I'm very much a realist. I just recently came from Texas. I served as executive director there. But rather than hoping for some great miracle, we just worked hard. We recruited a record number of candidates. We got record numbers of votes. Libertarian Party candidates did in Texas. And independents have done quite well in Texas as well for governor in the recent past. It's certainly possible that an independent or a libertarian or another party could get into Congress. I wish it would happen. I hope it happens, and it's my job to help make that happen, and I'll do everything I can to make it happen. But additionally, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that, in my opinion, every vote for someone who supports true freedom, and that means every vote for a Libertarian Party candidate, makes a difference whether that candidate ultimately wins his election or not. If libertarians are out there getting 2%, then I want to get out there and get 5% in our races. If we can go from 5% to 10% and we only get 10% for the next 100 years, I think that's better than if we were only getting 5%. Because when you vote for libertarian, you're sending an absolutely clear message that you are for smaller government on all issues.
Wes Benedict, the executive director of the Libertarian National Party, thanks very much for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/freedomwatch and on Sirius 145, XM 168, or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.